All right, welcome back, everybody. The Independent Voter Podcast. We are not in studio today, as you might be able to tell, but we're still spread out across the country with Kara out there in Maine, cold Maine, right?
It's so cold. It's so cold here that yesterday, just the ice built up on the deck. It's out of control. I'm so jealous of you being in San Diego right now. I can't even
It,
put it into words.
and San Diego's, we've had a few cold winters, but it's not winter yet. Like, you don't even need to wear a jacket. It's January, and I jumped in my parents' pool the other day.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I bet you are too, Sean, right?
I am, yeah. So, and you know how this is, Kara. It's so cold right now. We have to keep the faucets running here,
Holy cow.
in order to prevent the pipes from freezing. So and bursting. So that's always fun to have to do that. You know, but yeah, it's I personally have always been the type of person who likes the cold, but it gets to you at a certain point. But definitely jealous of that San Diego weather.
Since I'm from California, it's always a revelation for me. I'll tell you guys a funny story. When I first moved to New York 20 something years ago, my husband and I had moved into a new rental house, and I was upstairs taking a shower and the water was cold. And so I came downstairs and I said, honey, the water's cold in the shower. And he said, well, did you pay the oil bill? And I said, well, what's oil for? And so, like, basically in the East, we have to get an oil tank filled up with this heating oil in order to heat our houses and to heat our laundry, and our water and everything. I didn't even know what that was. So anyway, now I definitely know what it is now, and I have to budget for it every single winter. It's really expensive.
Yeah, it's tough for you, California transplant. That's why people may be leaving, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm California, here to stay, San Diego. Sean was out here in California.
Yeah, I feel like I got spoiled for the 6 years I lived in San Diego, but I come from Texas, so I've had kind of the full range of weather in my life. I've had the most extreme heats in the summer, the great temperatures of San Diego all year round, and then the frigid cold winters of the north.
And that's why you're so independent, because you got all these different perspectives, right?
That's it. That's right.
That person must live in the cold. Oh, that person, they must have too much heat, right?
The crazy thing, though, I just wanted to say, like, my kids who were born, in Maine and grew up on the East Coast, like, they go out in this weather wearing no hat, no jacket. It drives me completely crazy. And they just look at me and they say, we're Mainers, mama.
30, 40 degree weather. People are walking out in shorts up here in Chicago because, they're just built different here. But, Chad, you brought up an interesting point. I think there is something to say for people who've lived, and experienced different, places, different people, developing an independent mind when you've lived all over the country. So because you've seen how other people live and experienced different forms of living yourself. So
it's true. When I first moved to the East Coast, one thing that I couldn't believe, Chad, is how different the men in California are than the men on the East Coast in New York. Like, they just have a totally different sensibility when it comes to dating, and that was a revelation for me too.
Is this
California,
a knock on us West Coasters, or is this a compliment?
Yes, it was all the guys that I would date in California are so laid back and like whatever. And when I got to New York, I was like, wow, these men really they really have it together in a totally different way. I think it's just a little bit more stressed out, maybe.
All right. Well, so knocking us West Coast males. Oh well, but yeah. What do we got on the docket today? We have some political stuff to talk about, some independent voter stuff. I think we're starting with ICE, right? This has been obviously a huge topic. Everything's a lot of tension on Minneapolis. We got politicians dropping F-bombs. We got movements to abolish ICE. Sound very familiar to the, defund the police kind of stuff. And then the other side, we had a post that's saying, has ICE gone too far on Facebook? I don't know how many thousands of comments there are now, but the comments are all over the map.
There's like going on 7,000 comments at the moment, just on this one post where we just said, has ICE gone too far? Just super simple question. And yeah, so thousands of people are weighing in, and I'm going to say it's all over the map. There's way more people than I thought saying no. ICE has not gone too far. ICE, ICE, baby. I was surprised
Yeah.
by that, particularly after that woman, Renee Nicole Good, was killed in Minnesota. I thought that that was going to be a tipping point for ICE for sure, and I guess I was wrong.
Well, I mean, I think it's people have totally different. They're in different realities, right? I mean, if you're on one side of that, you saw that event, right? And there was I mean, it was hard. I remember the first day you saw those videos, like, man, how is ICE going to defend this and stuff, right? And it was pretty bad. But then the next day, you see a video that comes out that kind of appears like the officer got ran over. And the reality is, with all the cameras and with everything else, we can still have different perspectives of the same event that are really get framed by where kind of where we're starting from. So there are a lot of folks that, they're like, we got invaded and flooded with all this. They believe, right? There's like all this frauds going on because of the narrative on this. So everything you want to see through their eyes is like, we got to do everything necessary to stop this. And then you have the flip side of, you know, well, we got the Gestapo comparing it to the Nazis and everything. I think this is a perfect example of American politics, right? We go, yes, there is truth that Trump got elected in order to get the immigration stuff under control. And that's the question, though. Has he gone too far? I mean, we're seeing examples of stuff where it's like, did the people really vote for that? Right.
I'm going to say that the people did not really vote for that, but maybe I'm showing my bias. I think that there's also just been the lies coming out of the administration about what happened, about what I saw with my very own eyes, and then I see, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, in a cowboy hat, saying that this woman was a domestic terrorist, and I just that's not what I saw, and so yeah, maybe it's my bias, but that it was really troubling for me. I definitely think that ICE has gone too far because it doesn't have to be like this, right? It really doesn't have to be like this. And also, I don't necessarily think, Chad, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, but it seems to me that a lot of the people that they're rounding up are not dangerous criminals, and these are just people who came here, like the Irish immigrants came here, like my Italian immigrant ancestors came here, just because they're this is part of the American story, and it's all being rewritten, and it makes me sick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I can give a perspective, and my wife might kill me for bringing up, some of her politics on this show. I can already hear, but for those of you who know, my wife, she's from Brazil. Her whole family still lives in Brazil, right? She was here on a student visa when I met her, right? And actually, her perspective was, yeah, you got to get the immigration stuff under control. Like, I'm going to go and I'm going to do the process. I'm going to do it right. I'm filing it was a long, arduous process. She is a citizen today, right? And so kind of her perspective was, yeah, why are you letting all these people? I followed the rules. I did all the paperwork, right? But then now, skip forward, now she has friends that are trying to go through the process. They go to a hearing and get detained, right? Which I think there's where you show the perfect example of, in my view, my one single biased perspective. It's like, yeah, we voted to get people into a process, right?
Sure.
That's what we voted for. And you're going so far, people trying to do the process and then you're detaining them. That seems like, well,
I,
that's counter to what we voted for.
I think one of the stories that really stuck out to me was this story of these people. They've gone through the process. They've been vetted, right? They're about to go to their naturalization ceremony, and 100 people there. 38 out of the 100 were detained or put or turned away the day they were supposed to be naturalized, and they went through the legal process. For years they had gone through it to become a naturalized citizen, and then they were turned away. And it really does, like, how we respond to this really speaks to the great irony that we've never had greater access to information, and yet we've never been given more focused and narrow views of the world around us, depending on where you're getting your news. So some people will see, beyond the Renee Good stuff, where ICE is ramming cars to stop people. They're throwing tear gas into the cars, and there's one story about a infant inside a car whose heart stopped or who stopped breathing because of tear gas that was thrown in the car, right? And when you hear those stories, you can definitely come to the conclusion that yes, ICE has gone too far. But I think, I was listening to Andrew Yang yesterday saying, most people, even Democrats, will agree that, we have a legal channel. We should be encouraging people to go through that legal channel. There's also violent people here that ICE needs to focus on, right? Who are not in this country legally. And that needs to be the focus of ICE. That was the promise that
Right.
Trump gave was that he was going to focus on these people. And I think that's what people want to see.
Right, but if you live in the left side narrative, and that's where your news comes from, that's where the algorithms say that you're right. The discussion being had on that side is we're for immigration, and the other side is against immigrants, right? So everything's framed in that perspective. All the new things that you hear are framed in that perspective. Then if you live in the right circles, it's the opposite. There's a very subtle but important distinction. They say we're for legal immigration and they're for illegal immigration. So everything you get is framed in, look, here's proof they're for illegal immigration, and here's proof we care about, right? Where that's the distinguishing point. We have this argument about immigration and we look at this in our own poll. We surveyed 1,700 people in California, verified back, known, not just independent voters, but independent voters who we verified have voted in at least 2 of the last 4 major elections. Okay. Looking even at Latinos specifically, of those, over 500 were Latinos. You look at the crosstabs on this question has ICE, is there a role for ICE? The national narrative would have you believe that Latinos have totally gone, no, they're part of the abolish ICE narrative. It is not true. It's not substantial, but a majority of independent Latinos in California say there's an important role for ICE, right? And so,
But the question does say, to be fair, like the question does say, use the word danger, right?
right,
To get dangerous, to deport and have mass deportation of dangerous people.
correct.
So, but, and that is like a really important distinction because I think that most people in America would agree that the dangerous people who are not here legally should definitely be deported. Maybe they don't think that they need to be sent to El Salvador to CCOT, but these are the people who haven't broken the rules, who have been living here, playing by the rules, who are part of the process, who are at their naturalization ceremony. That
Yeah,
those are the people, and so this is what our politics doesn't allow, is for this nuance. And if you're speaking out in favor of the nuance, then all of a sudden, am I defending rapists and murderers?
exactly.
No, of course
Well,
not.
and
But
and the temptation is always to go to the immediate extremes within our because of how our system treats these issues. So when you hear about what's going on in Minnesota, it's either more ICE, more do it. They deserve political immunity or whatever for any actions. They need to keep doing what they're doing, or abolish ICE. Those are
Right.
your two options that you're given, and not anything
Exactly.
in the middle.
And
Yeah.
that's my point. Now there's this rallying cry on the left, abolish ICE, right? Well, that's not where the people are at. That's the point I'm making in the poll. I think Kara makes a good point too, right? They're not saying, okay, let's have ICE go out just like the Gestapo and do whatever the heck they want. They're saying there's a proper role for them. But our politics puts us in this place. And it's now, oh, are you part of the abolish ICE crowd? Or are you part of the everything they do is right and they can't possibly do anything wrong crowd? Right. And that's where we're at.
and then like, to make it even worse, then there's the political operatives who push these narratives, right? They're
Mhm.
so excited on the right when the Democrats start saying abolish ICE. Like, this is
I
exactly
know.
what they want
Well,
the Democrats to say, is to abolish ICE, because they know that people don't want to abolish ICE and that the
just like they
Democrats
didn't
will
want to defund the police. I mean, you look here,
exactly.
everybody that was defund the police ran away from it, right? That election because they realized that's not where once it came to the general election, that's not where the people were at, right? But we get so much focus on this because right now we're coming up on primary season, right? I think it turns out the second thing we are going to talk about, and one of the viral posts that Ethan's been putting together, right? You see, like Governor Newsom sitting on a show with Shapiro, right?
With Ben Shapiro, right?
Yeah, Ben Shapiro, right? We got right, then an anti-Trump, governor, and there's all this stuff in the national narrative they disagree about, and then they have one agreement, and it's, oh yeah, what you did on gerrymandering, that's fine, that's part of the game, right? Treating it as if democracy is a game between two teams, and this is kind of what yeah, sorry, shouldn't get this passionate. This is kind of what boils my blood, right? They're having this conversation like, oh, accepted. This is accepted. Okay, your team owns California and you're allowed to gerrymander it, right? And our team, and they do it with straight faces. They do it like, oh, this is okay. I mean, what Newsom and Shapiro just agreed with a straight face, talking to millions of people, and I think are totally oblivious to what they just said, was that voters, their rights are somehow secondary to the power of political parties. And when a political party takes ownership of your state, it's in their right to diminish the rights of the rest of the voters. I find that absurd, and I don't know why that doesn't boil more people's blood when the governor of California and a leader of the right, the conservative movement say it without giving it a second thought.
Not so much talk about protecting democracy anymore from
Right.
Newsom when it comes to that kind of, because he understands the power that he now holds as a result of passing Prop 50.
They're
And
always, 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 always going to use whatever power is available to them in any of these scenarios. It's very, very, I mean, we've said this over and over again on this podcast in so many of our conversations. It's like politicians do not give up power willingly, and they're going to
Mhm.
use everything that's on the table. They're going to use it, and they're going to go back and forth. And this is it. This is, and
Well,
to
it's
them, maybe it is, a game. For Gavin Newsom, he thinks he is protecting democracy by stopping the Republicans,
right.
right?
But if we can't connect that, what Newsom and Shapiro just agreed on, to the previous conversation, right, of abolish ICE versus ICE can do no wrong, that is at the core of why we have that problem. The more the parties can narrow the people that they actually are accountable to, right? The
Yes.
less the less folks who either don't join them or don't just go to groupthink even matter. They don't matter. And that's why we see a national narrative that's totally out of touch with what you see in our poll of 1,700 known independent voters saying this national narrative does not represent us. And I think that's reflective of a whole lot more people in the United States.
Well, I'll tell you what, Chad, I do think that we can connect it back to the past conversation because the other clips that I edited from that podcast were actually of Newsom and Shapiro discussing the situation with ICE. And specifically, it was Newsom saying that California has carried out more deportations coordinating with ICE than any other state, which is interesting to me. I think he's trying to connect with, the other side of the aisle there. But I think it shows a bit of his willingness to kind of branch out into the Trump style of a little bit of fabrication of the truth and a little bit of embellishing what's actually going on here because he sees that that's what's working in today's social media powered age of politics. Do you think that
Yeah.
he's really like taking that route there, or is he just trying to, throw him a bone, throw
I,
Shapiro a bone?
I see this as okay. Like you see a lot of the operatives and the people that are living the Democratic Party, folks I talk to, and it's like, oh, Gavin's doing great. He's playing this. He's playing the Trump, right? They're so happy about him being out there and basically playing Trump's game, right? Which is exactly right. Like that is exactly what Trump does. He does do that. He plays the bravado. He's actually he is not far right, right? You can say a lot of things about him, but ideologically, he's not governing like he's a far right crazy. I mean, we can argue on the immigration stuff. He has been doing stuff, but like look at in Greenland. he said he's going to go and do all this stuff. And like, I don't know, Kara, you might not agree, but like, I never thought Trump was actually going to go and send troops and start a war with Greenland. It may be, fanciful of what he's asking for. Maybe it's not, but like, just, it's a little bit of bravado, right? That everybody takes it too seriously.
Well,
I
and
mean,
they
maybe
also
I'm
have
wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
they have that saying, Trump always chickens out, taco. So, and then there's all the manipulation of the markets and, the disbelief really of our allies, of our NATO allies at this point, that, they can't believe that this is happening, that he would actually threaten military, using the United States military against a NATO ally.
But
And
that's why,
speaking of manipulating the markets, I mean, he literally timed his speech this morning, which was the first time that he said he wouldn't use any violence to acquire Greenland during the opening of the markets. So we saw yesterday a 2% drop in the S&P 500. And then this morning during his speech, as the markets opened, we saw another raise. Tell me, I mean, if you're Trump, you're probably going to tell a few of your buddies what you're saying in this speech this morning, right? There's no question there that can be
People
used
are
to,
making
I mean,
so
because
much money, Ethan, on the volatility. I mean, I've actually talked
absolutely.
to Steve Peace to Steve Peace a little bit about this, but the volatility is really bad for some people, but really good for other people. And all of this up and down that's happening in our markets, with the volatility of our dear leader, certainly there's people who are laughing all the way to the bank.
I mean, I certainly think that happens. I mean, we look through, you can go through Congress. There's actually a big effort right now to keep Congress from stock trading and all that stuff, which I personally support. But that's going on in perpetuity. The right side has a narrative. You look at what they say about Nancy Pelosi and her trading skills, right? It goes on, but that's a very bipartisan issue. I think
Yeah,
that
they're
happens.
they're
But
they're all
my
against it.
my
Anybody
only
who's in power is against it.
Right, right. But like, my only point is, like, I personally never, ever in a million years, like, would think anything he's done is like, there's no way he's going to send the United States to do anything militarily in Greenland and have a physical attack with our allies and stuff in NATO. Maybe I'm wrong,
What
but
if
like,
what if
that
Macron
never
what if
considered.
Macron came out and said, Trump, he's a wuss. He would never do that. We're gonna send all of our troops. Let's see what he does. Like what if one of the Europeans have been very cautious. They've been very, let's not tempt the man. But let's just say all of a sudden he flips his mind and Trump hears this, he goes, are you kidding me? Like, you're gonna call me a wuss? Like, I've got the biggest military in the world. What happens then? What do you think Trump does then? Does he back down? Is it a taco
50%
moment?
tariff. 50%
50%.
tariff.
Well, and
So
that
he's
is
just gonna
kind of
keep
what
the.
you've been seeing. You've been kind of seeing him do these 100, 200% tariffs on stuff as his countermeasure to Europe, opposing his takeover of Greenland or his want for Greenland. And Macron will speak nice to him in text messages, but then you also read reports about how, he's advocating for NATO to do these joint military drills in Greenland just in case, just to prepare. So with Trump, the thing about him is every time people are like, oh, he's just joking. And then he follows through with the thing that everyone thought he was joking on. But then he'll say things that come off maybe a little too seriously that he doesn't quite follow through with, because he does know the repercussions of what that action might be. So
I mean, I also do want to point out, for the record, I mean, I think Macron's approval rating's like 3.2% right now or something like that. That's an
Well, I mean,
exaggeration, but it ain't good.
just saying that the president of the United States also has his lowest approval ratings at any point in his career, and definitely the lowest of this second term. Definitely not as high as he would probably want it to be. And also, the Republicans in Congress, with this tiny razor thin margin and the midterms, upon us, it's going to be interesting to watch how Trump's popularity affects those congressional races and Senate races across the country. Um,
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know, maybe we should kick it to Sean, because he's the one that's got his eye on a lot of like the reform stuff and how it affects these races. I know there's there's some tension going on in Missouri right now. So what do you got on that, Sean?
Yeah, so there haven't been really any updates on Missouri since we last spoke about it last week. The Denny Hoskins had admitted that he had used prejudicial language when it came to a veto referendum to overturn the gerrymander that they did there. In South Carolina, you got U.S. Rep. Ralph Norman, who wants to close primaries there. And South Carolina has a system similar to Texas where it's open partisan primary, where anyone could go on election day and pick a party ballot. You don't have to register by party. He wants to see that changed so only registered party members can vote there, which would definitely have an impact on the type of candidate that you would see advance from a primary and could have an ultimate impact on the November elections there. Now, the reasoning he uses is very similar to what we've heard from partisans in the past, this concern over Democrats crossing over to sabotage the Republican primaries. The current governor, actually, very interestingly enough, opposes moving the closed primaries there in South Carolina because he believes and understands that this notion of crossover voting is not 100% a myth, but it's not. There's not the sabotage that they claim happens.
It is a myth. It's ridiculous. It's hard enough to get people to come out and vote for things and to move a bunch of people to go out. But think about this. I want to take this opportunity to talk about the hypocrisy of conservative small government ideology in this context. Right. These are the times I get called, you're just really a Democrat because you're calling out the Republicans. Okay, if you believe in small government, right? Look at Texas and South Carolina. Why do they have open primaries and you don't register by party? Okay, because what's the state's business getting involved in registering you for your private organization, right? That's small government. Go do your private organization stuff, separation of the private activities and state activities. And so when it comes to public elections, your party should be agnostic, right? That's a small L libertarian, small government position. I don't care what your private organization is. My job is the state. So what they're really trying to do in Texas and in South Carolina is force registration to the state. Why that's important is when you come to the courtroom, right? Now your private associational rights are attached to the state's process, which gives them a reason to go and argue, well, now if you didn't join our party, you can't participate in our private primaries. It's important to understand what the long-term consequences are. And from an ideological perspective, any Republican that says, I think you ought to register your party registration with a state to participate in a taxpayer funded election has a pretty hard time saying that they're any kind of conservative. Those are big government forcing your foundational right to be attached to the state. So I can make that argument on the Democrat side too, but that kind of boils my blood when these people, they proudly call themselves far right, small government conservatives are literally the ones in South Carolina and Texas right now saying you need to attach your rights and register those rights with the state.
Well, the reason why I said it isn't entirely a myth is because the sabotage part is the myth. But when you look at academics who've done research on this, they'll say that in any given election, 1 to 2% of voters will cross over from the previous election having picked one party's primary to the other party's primary in the next election. But that's not an indication of them trying to sabotage or weaken that party. It's because they have a candidate on the other side now that they want to vote for. The thing is these party insiders, they like to point to, oh, well, this Democratic official encouraged voters to do this. Or, Rush Limbaugh, infamously, like a long time ago, had advocated for Republicans to do this to Democrats. The reason voters don't do that, even when officials call for it, is because they don't think like party insiders. They don't scheme like party insiders. They just want to vote for the person they want to vote for.
Right. And God forbid our party has a candidate that actually talks to people outside our party and they want to come and vote for him, right? These people that say they believe in competition everywhere. They're let's have competition everywhere. Business, we need competition. Everything, we need competition. But when it comes to our election process, let's monopolize. If you don't join our party, you don't get a vote in the primary. We get to select all this stuff. No, this is our private associational rights in the state process. It just blows my mind. And the only reason it doesn't get confronted is because neither side has an interest in calling it out. I mean, the Democrats do the exact same thing. Democratic Party v. Jones. The California case, Democratic Party v. Jones, that said the old California open primary, independents can't vote, it's private right. The Democratic Party brought it, and who argued the case before the Supreme Court was the Republican Party's attorney. If there's no better evidence of how they partner on the most critical things on democracy to exclude anybody who thinks independently, Democratic Party v. Jones is it. And so, like, those are the nuances that nobody ever discusses, but they're directly related to why we have the discussions that we have today.
Yeah, I mean, the same arguments that you hear from Republicans in South Carolina and Texas, same arguments you heard from Democrats in Hawaii, right? And so, like, in a state like Oregon that's controlled by Democrats, they have a closed primary system, even though the plurality of voters are registered unaffiliated of a political party. Yet these voters have no access to those taxpayer-funded elections. And so now you have two initiatives proposed for the 2026 ballot. One, a constitutional amendment that would make it illegal for the state to conduct taxpayer-funded closed primaries, which would open, these parties up to be able to do their own private nomination proceedings on their own dime. But the other initiative is to change state law to allow for a top two nonpartisan primary, similar to what is in place in California and Washington. And the controversy there right now is that the Oregon Department of Justice, they're in charge of drafting ballot language. So they have one of their attorneys draft ballot titles for the ballot. And
For both of them, or just for the constitutional amendment?
For both of them, for all
Okay.
ballot initiatives. And
Okay.
so what this attorney did was title them basically the same, basically saying it changes primary elections for most, primaries for most elections, top two advance. But that's misleading because that's not what the constitutional amendment does. That's what the change the state law does, but not the constitutional amendment. And so the motivations of this attorney for doing this are unclear because you have former secretaries of state, Democratic secretaries of state, former Democratic governors, also Republican officials jointly coming out and saying that they didn't do their due diligence here. But at the same time, they're still going to defend the current system. The people who say, well, yeah, the DOJ didn't do his job, but we still believe in the current system that we have that locks out 1.1 million independent voters.
So are they criticizing it because they really just would rather have it fail? They're not criticizing it necessarily because, there was some hanky-panky or it's not super clear for voters what they're voting for. They're criticizing it because they're trying to say a pox on all your houses and we just stick with the status quo?
Well, I mean, they're motivated. Yeah, I can't really speak to their motivations, but I mean, I can guarantee you that the major parties will be the biggest opponents to any initiative to open. They always have been in Oregon. And this is not the first time they've tried to reform primaries in Oregon, and they've failed because of the two parties jointly, working to keep it from happening.
I'm sensing a theme.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we're at our quick hits moments, right? I'm not in studio with Lena today, but I can hear her in the background saying, come on guys, move on. So Ethan, why don't you say a quick, let us know what you got going online. I don't know, every day I wake up, you got some multiple posts going crazy.
I feel like there's like a competition right now, a little bit going on where when I get online and I try to figure out like, how can I come up with a post that's going to beat Ethan's post? And I have to say that I have been the loser,
well, guys, I mean,
every time.
I don't know. Wasn't it your idea to put on Has Ice Gone Too Far?
Yeah, I mean, that was my idea, but it didn't do as well as I thought it was going to do. And I just think
9,000 comments.
Well, you're at over 100,000 views on that one.
Ethan's
there's a big difference though so what you have to understand is there's two different algorithms, right? There's the algorithm that it that the content goes on when you post just a picture or a question. Then there's the Reels algorithm, which is based on watch time, duration, engagement, which is when I post a video, it's going onto that algorithm instead. So that's reaching an entirely different kind of audience that's been curated by a different part of the system. So when you think about, can I compete with my posts? I mean, it's a different game that we're playing. We're playing a
Okay.
completely different game
All
here.
right.
So,
All right.
if you have a clip that you want me to turn into a video, we can do that. Absolutely. But for me, it's been really enlightening making these videos because I've never done anything on Facebook before. And let me tell you, the audiences on Facebook are some very, let's say, passionate people. Like some of the comments that I've had the pleasure or displeasure of reading on here have really shocked me to my core in terms of, and what's also crazy about Facebook is when you hover over someone's name, it'll say like, oh, this guy's name is Doug Freeman, lives in, wherever in Connecticut. Like, you can identify exactly who that person is online. If you know how to use the white pages, you can find their address. I mean, it's pretty absurd the things that people are willing to say when it's extremely easy to figure out who they are in real life. So, maybe they aren't living in the cancel culture of Gen Z, but
Yeah, but one of the things you also got to think, like, you got to understand there's the 100 to 1 rule too, right? Like, this is the difficulty of our page. I mean, if you go on the internet, almost every conversation, it's one group of folks, right? This is the hardest part about what we do, I think, as independent voter. But look at the post. The question for ICE: how do we have such diverse comments, right? We're proud that we've kept that environment, right? Most of the time, it's the most passionate people that speak up and they'll talk, right? But 9,000 comments, but there's hundreds of thousands of people that saw the post, lots of people that look at the comments and see the diversity of thought. I think that's what we're trying to do at Independent Voter. The hardest part is because once you do something that may be viewed as, oh, that's kind of hitting the Democratic Party a little bit, or that kind of hits the Republican Party a little bit. Yeah, there's a portion of the viewers that go, you're not really independent, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we can't prevent that. But I think those of you who have stayed around and seen us over 15 years and now we're getting more active, right? I hope you appreciate that. Like, even Kara and I and Sean and Ethan, like, we argue all the time about different positions on stuff, but that's the point. Like, isn't that the purpose
Well,
of government in
yeah,
the first
yeah,
place, is
I
to
actually
understand our differences?
I think there's a misconception that some people have, and we've actually seen this in the comments, where they think being independent or independent minded means being neutral, which is not the case. Like, we all have our viewpoints. Kara, Chad, myself, Ethan, we've all expressed those on this podcast. And being neutral isn't being independent minded. In fact, I would say if you're neutral on stuff, then you're not independent minded.
Yeah.
It's just your ability to think for yourself, think critically,
and
and
Sean, what I was
accept that.
about to bring up, I literally saw a TikTok just yesterday explaining that exact concept to people. It was talking about how people
Why
believe
didn't
that
you make the
independence
TikTok?
mean you play. Well, I'm talking to you about it right now. I mean, it's more of an opinion piece. It's just someone, speaking to the camera about what they think, but talking about how one of the major misconceptions is that independents are neutral in the middle, when in reality, it's more of a swing voter type of thing where whoever is challenging the status quo, or, at one point the candidate's Bernie, at one point it's Trump. It's not an ideological divide.
I
And
mean,
there's so many people who support Bernie and Trump. Can you imagine?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, Ethan's going to undersell. He doesn't just post stuff online. He actually helped us put together a pretty amazing data studio on that survey. Those of you who have seen on our website, right? We can visualize all the crosstabs and everything. And one of the big visualizations you see, it says party trust. We ask people, okay, if you had to choose, is there a party that you trust more? It's unbelievable. The split is almost exactly a third, a third, a third. A third told us, if I had to choose, I'd probably go with the Republicans. A third said, if I had to choose, I'd probably go with Democrats. And a third said, I'm not choosing no matter what, right? I don't like either one of them. And then you go through a crosstab, you see independents are not a monolith at all. They go left of the Democratic Party, they go right of the Republican Party, up, down, and in the middle. The only thing that binds them, one, I think, is there's a sense of belief in fairness because they feel like the two-party system has not treated them fairly. And they want to think for themselves. They want some party saying, oh, this is your position because that's what we all agreed it is. right?
Well,
That's
and I
it.
mean, you look at a polling agency like Gallup, finding, a record high number of Americans now self-identify as independent, but then they try to break that down into leaners, and this is something that pollsters do, which kind of fuels this argument that independent voters don't really exist, when that's not true at all. But what they don't talk about is that, well, we do have a political system that forces people into two camps or tries to push them, and we've talked about this analogy before, that it's like going out to dinner and your only two options are McDonald's and Burger King. You're gonna have your preference. I mean, I'm gonna tell you, probably 90% of the time I'm gonna pick McDonald's, 85% maybe, but but people are going to have their preference.
So Whoppers, come on, everybody. No,
We actually had this. We had a Christmas dinner, and this was a big source of discussion about whether or not the Whopper was superior to the Big Mac. And then, you know, my son
yes,
through DoorDash ordered both, like during the dinner, so that we could then do the actual taste test at home. I was so mad at him because it was like $18 for a hamburger
Kara was
from
mad.
DoorDash.
Kara's like, are you serious? You could have gotten like 3 more things and we could have done ranked choice voting.
You know what? I used to think that I used to be like the Big Mac was better than the Whopper type person, but the franchise that got me into flame broiled burgers here in Chicago is Portillo's. So it just comes to show that third option will introduce you into a type of
Yeah,
of a
that's
burger
right.
that you enjoy more. So
And I'll tell you, the first thing that I do when I land in California, like get my bag, put it in the rental car, and go to the In-N-Out Burger. Like first stop. That
Mhm.
is the best
It's pretty
fast
good, but
food.
they're moving out east. I think they even moved their headquarters to Texas recently because
Oh,
remember, In-N-Out is they're pretty conservative folks at In-N-Out, and they're not really happy with the state of California, and they're expanding out east, including
speaking of leaving California, we're going to do a How It Really Works on the wealth tax, right?
yeah. I mean, there's something that even I'm excited to see it because I don't understand it fully, right? But it is. People go, oh, that's a wealth tax, right? It's not just like, oh, they're going to tax billionaires more. Like this is a fundamentally different type of taxation, right? That Kara's going to get to the bottom of. Ethan's going to be putting some stuff together. I'm excited to see it. I'm Sean's going to be involved as always. But this is an interesting issue. Wherever your perspective is, I think the point of this is you can't find anywhere is like, okay, just explain what it is, right? Like,
Exactly. Like without putting the Democratic lens or the Republican lens on it and writing it according to that, sort of write it more neutrally, just the facts, and then also point out here's what the Democrats are saying about it. Here's what the party Republicans are saying about it. Here and just point that out, and then let people make their own minds.
well, I think there's a good opportunity to comment on that. I mean, Sean knows this. We actually, when we first started IVN, this is years ago. We had a lot more regular authors and stuff because of the tech platform and blah blah, blah. We get a whole lot of conversation. But my point is, sometimes we do basically make an editorial position. We did the How It Really Works on the cannabis versus hemp. And I mean, when you go through the facts, it was like, what are you guys doing? Right. And, people could accuse us of making an editorial position on that. I just say to the folks, the one thing about it is like, we still may end up with a perspective you think's biased. You think you have a better argument or a different position, submit your own, right? We have a simple etiquette on IVN of not name calling and substantiate your sources, right? If you don't agree with it, like, I hope you feel comfortable, reach out to us, write your own article. We'll publish it. If you meet the criteria, which has nothing to do with agreeing with us, it more means write a professional article that is like following our etiquette. We will publish, and we've published stuff all the time, including lots of things that were trash the top 2 primary, which is how independent voter got started. That's
yeah,
okay.
I
You don't
mean
like top 2, write your article.
Yeah, it shouldn't surprise anyone that we kind of editorialize when it comes to reform. And I mean, looking back at Prop 50, I remember that we we reported on just the facts when it came to Prop 50
That's
about
right.
what the legislature was doing, about what the commission was saying about this, and the history of all that. And it came off very biased against Prop 50, and it because the the California Democrats were telling people that this was all about saving democracy, and that they really support independent maps when they were actually getting rid of an independent map. So like, and just pointing that out, people were like, well, they're just trying to save democracy and all this. How can you be so biased for it and not give the other side? And our position is, write it. Send us an article. We will publish a Prop 50 piece, or when back then, obviously
People
elections
might,
over.
they probably, maybe if they're following us, they wouldn't be, but people might be surprised how many Democratic members privately were hair on fire, upset that
And you have
they
the
got forced.
Republicans. You have Republicans too who are standing up against, you know, their Republican allies who are refusing to redistrict in several states. So it's not just certain Dems, in back rooms. Like people are standing up for what's right.
and
There
and
still are a few of them out there, right?
And I've been proud of the deeper covers that we've done on some of these stories that may come off as editorializing or something to people. But like with the Prop 50, we were talking about how the California legislature removed the trigger language well ahead of anybody else. No one was talking about that, and it wasn't until like a couple of weeks ago that people started to point out, oh well, look, would they like, it doesn't matter if the Texas maps are overturned now. The California Prop 50 will stay in place because they removed the trigger language. We're the ones who broke that story.
And it comes full circle. Why?
Yeah.
Because Gavin Newsom and Ben Shapiro and Donald Trump all agree that voting rights are not as important as the power of their political party to claim ownership over your state. Well, how we got to the point where that's a blue state, that's a red state, right? The relative margin between people that are registered, I mean, in fact, we get, how many tens of thousands of people come to IVN and IVP every month to look at the voter registration statistics. And almost every day we get somebody emailing us something nasty like, how could you say there's more Democrats in Texas than there are Republicans? Well, we have a whole explanation. They don't register by party, but there's L2, the most trusted, best, voter data company in the country, the most nonpartisan, has a full-on explanation of how they come up and get these registration statistics, which if you read it, make a lot of sense why, if you're going to identify people by party, there actually are more Democrats registered in Texas, even if they don't come out to vote that way in a general election, right? So it's fascinating how we get in this political environment that Texas is red and everything they do is Republican. California is blue and everything. What about like me? I live in California, and go to Northern California and try to find, like, real North California, and try to find a Democrat. They aren't up there, right?
I love
And
how you
so,
call it real Northern California versus what?
yeah, yes,
Marin
Oakland
County
and
and San
San
Francisco.
Francisco. You're in Central. You're still in Central California. Like, you're not even close to the north.
You do have a really, really big state. It's I remember driving one time. I had a race I was doing up in Eureka, and I had to go from, I guess maybe I was in San Francisco or Marin, and then driving, and it took me, I couldn't believe how long it took me to get there. It just goes on and on and on and on. Whereas on the East Coast, you could be in 5 states within the same 2-hour period,
Well,
Welcome to Massachusetts. Welcome to Vermont. Welcome
I
to
live
New Hampshire.
I live in East County by the border. I can go to a lunch meeting in Tijuana, Mexico, and finish eating and get back before I could go to a lunch meeting in Los Angeles. Like,
Yeah.
people on the outside go, "Oh, it's San Diego, you live by Los Angeles." Well, actually, like, it's much easier to do business and go down there in Mexico,
Especially
right?
when there's missiles being fired over the freeway, and we got to shut down I-5. Like, you never know
Yeah.
what's happening up north these days. So
Yeah,
That's
it's
yeah.
It's this is
Anyways.
quite the world we're living in, guys. I love being in it with you. I adore all of you. Thank you for this great conversation this morning, and it's really also great that Ethan for you to join us. Love seeing your
Yeah,
face.
we'll be back in the studio next.
Maybe we'll get him a
week.
microphone.
Let's get him a real
Yeah.
microphone and some headphones and make him legit.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Looking forward to it, guys.
All right.
All
Appreciate you all. For our listeners, subscribe, join us on IVN. We have a lot of exciting stuff coming up this year. Thank you all. We'll
smash that like button, guys.
Smash
Just
the
destroy
like
that
button.
like button.
Smash the like button for Ethan,
Yep.
and it's IVN.us. That's where all of the independent voter news is. And then on Facebook, we're Independent Voter. And is that the same thing on Instagram, Ethan?
Yep.
Independent Voter. Verified.
Independent Voter. All right.
All right. See you all soon.
Have a good week.
This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by OLAS Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olasmedia.com.
OLAS Media.